All right, guys, in this video, we're gonna go over the shrinking technique using a gold Teflon hard card. This is a 4-inch hard card, and this is probably one of the most popular shrinking techniques, aside from using the glove and the felt hard card. Just so you guys know, the felt hard card is my favorite method, but this is how I started and how I tinted for about 8 years, shrinking with the gold hard card. So let's jump right into this. All you need is a heat gun. I have the Wagner Ferno 300, I believe it is. This is the new style. The old style was a little bit more boxier, but it's the same exact heat gun in a different plastic housing. And the only other thing we'll need is the gold hard card. So to get started, I like to put the cord on my shoulder. That way you're not having the cord hang on the car, and you have full control of the cord around you so you don't trip. We're gonna put the heat gun on high, and then we'll get started here. What we're gonna do is make sure we have the H pattern in place, and then we're gonna slowly heat across the top. Now, as you're heating, I like to go over with my hands first, just to make sure these fingers are in line. All I'm doing is splitting the finger up. And then we can start pressing inch by inch as we heat, with the heat gun about 7 inches away from the glass. And then, so the concept here is we're gonna start from this side, shrink, and then come back and start again. You're not gonna shrink this way and shrink this way, only from you to away. Keeping that H pattern in place. And shrinking about 1 inch to 2-inch sections at a time. You can notice we can shrink right over that glass aid with no problem. So now that we have 1/4 section done, I like to go from the bottom to the top. You can start at the top and go to the bottom, vice versa, it doesn't really matter. The whole idea here is to evenly shrink the material. You don't want to go and shrink this and push the material to the other side, because then that last section will be harder to shrink. You want to keep it very even. So you can tell in the top corners there's more material, that all the corners, the bottom corner, there's more material here because this is where the glass typically bends or contours the most. So you want to pay most attention to this corner or any of the other corners. You want to pay attention to the corners more than you do the center, because the center is always going to be the easiest. So we'll start from the side here. You can see the H pattern kind of goes sideways. You want to focus on keeping that straight up and down vertical, because the film only shrinks one way, which is up and down. You can see that after I press with the card, I move the heat gun away so that the film doesn't get too hot and get a heat crease. And you can see as I'm shrinking, if the fingers go sideways like this, I'll run my finger through it and they'll go back straight up and down again. So always keep an eye on the position of the fingers and which way they're facing. Now, when you have a situation where the film curls like this, I like to go beyond it without heat and push it straight, and that'll lay it down. That just means it's shrunk and it's ready to be pressed, and you don't want to go and shrink before it and press without pressing it out first, if that makes sense. So already we have one side completely shrunk. You'll see scratches all over this film. This is just the release liner. This isn't the actual film side. So this is completely fine and completely normal. It's not a problem. It's going to be ripped off. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on this side. Start from the top or start from the bottom, whichever one you prefer. It's all about keeping the film laid out in the H pattern and the fingers going vertical up and down. Now you can see we have a little bit of a wing going on here. This is because the material got too hot here. You can do one of two things. You can cut this off and make the shrinking a little bit easier, or you can just go for it and test your expertise. But the only thing you have to watch out for is to not overheat this anymore. That's a burn in the film right there, down below where we're gonna cut. So let's go ahead for this and watch how I tackle it. So I'm gonna focus on the sides first and then work my way in slowly. Most of this is already shrunk, so I can pretty much just push it, and you can see a finger form there. And that's pretty much it. Very easy. Once you get the whole system down pat, it becomes second nature to shrink a back window. And we'll go ahead and tackle the top here for the last section, focusing on the side first, and then working your way in. You notice how when I'm on the last sections, I start to shrink bigger sections rather than small 2-inch sections at first, because most of the film is already shrunk, and all you have to really do is push it and apply a little bit of a heat. All right, now we have the film completely shrunk, and the last step before we apply the film is to final cut the material. We're gonna use a NT Pro A1, this is my favorite knife, followed by a stainless steel Olfa blade. Now what we're gonna do is, we just have to simply follow the glass aid here. I'll start from the side so you guys can see it. Maybe 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the glass aid, applying a decent amount of pressure, but not too much, just enough to cut the film. And all we're doing here on the glass side is scoring the glass aid vinyl tape. We're cutting all the way through the tint. I'll show you guys here. We're cutting all the way through the tint, but we're not cutting all the way through the 10 mil vinyl tape. So we'll do that around the entire edge, making sure that you don't go beyond the tape's limit or the tape's edge, because that's where the glass's edge is. If you go beyond it and you cut into the dot matrix, you're gonna have a light gap on the inside. We don't want that. That's why we take extra care when laying out the glass aid. And we'll start from the center up here. Following into a continuation of where we left off. All right, so sometimes you may notice that when you're cutting, you want to give the film a little pull just to make sure that you're releasing it. Sometimes when you're cutting on the glass aid, it won't cut all the way through, and because you're scared to apply too much pressure. So you just got to go back over it again and apply a little bit more pressure. You can see there's a spot here where we didn't cut all the way through. We just go over that again, and everything else is good except for finishing off that last corner. So do this final cut. A good technique is to pull the film away as you cut it at the same time. That way you know that you cut all the way through the material. It can be a little tricky learning with the glass aid, but it is extremely beneficial because you'll never score the glass. All right, so we have that full border cut. It's cut to size. Throw that out. All right, now that we have the film cut to size for installation of the window, the last step you want to do before you go into the installation section is you want to remove this glass aid so that it's not in the way. Depending on the installation method that you go with, if you're going to go with the Frankenstein off the back window or the reverse roll, I recommend removing this tape first and then following on to those steps. So let's go ahead and remove this tape. What we're going to do is we're going to go where we seamed it. You can see this overlap here. This is where the tape met itself. We're going to pick at the corner, trying not to pick at the edge of the film, and we'll pull it away. You're going to see that the glass aid separates in some areas. That's because we scored the material, and just like any other vinyl, it's going to separate at that impression in the film from the razor. So we can pull that away, and we'll go back over here. And again, as you're pulling it off, pull it away. That was an additional seam, so that's why it left there. And again, you can see the film or the glass aid separating. When it goes to that point, you're going to want to lift the edge of the film up, grab that piece that stayed under, lay the film back down, and pull the glass aid off. So now we have both sides, and we can pull it off at the same time. Now after pulling the glass aid off, and you're gonna Frankenstein or reverse roll off of the back window, you wanna spray a little soapy water around the edge, under the film, on the corners only, and outside on the entire window. And then we'll take the 5.5-inch yellow turbo, start from the top, go across. And what we're doing here is removing any contamination that could be on the top or the bottom of the window that could get into the tint. So this is the last step to the shrinking process, is removing that tape and spraying the soapy water, squeegeeing to make sure that you don't have any debris getting into the film. And then we'll go into the next shrinking techniques, and then followed by the installation techniques, so that you guys can pick which one works best for you. You can use any combination you want. Say that you want to shrink with the hard card, but you want to install reverse rolled, you're more than welcome to. Use this information to find out what works best for you. I'll see you guys in the next video where we're gonna shrink the back window with a felt card.